Legal troubles continue to mount for former President Donald Trump, even as he continues to overshadow the rest of the field for the 2024 Republican nomination, both in terms of polling and popularity within the party. He campaigned over the weekend in Iowa and Pennsylvania.
You know, they're not indicting me, they're indicting you. I just happen to be standing in their way.
Late Thursday, we learned of new charges in the classified document case being investigated by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith. Mr. Trump, on 2 occasions, showed off classified documents related to military plans. He's now been charged with an additional violation of the Espionage Act and 2 other counts. Despite his denials, we'd known about the incidents, one of which was captured on an audio tape obtained by CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge as Trump allegedly shares plans to attack Iran.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. As president, I could have did less. No, I can't, you know.
Trump has now been charged with unlawful retention of that document and is now accused of attempting to destroy evidence by pressuring a Mar-a-Lago employee to delete security video that had been subpoenaed by prosecutors in June of 2022. Sources tell chief campaign and election correspondent Robert Costa that footage could show a Trump aide moving boxes believed to be classified material out of a storage room. And who better to walk us through these developments than Catherine Herridge and Robert Costa here in Washington with me, and CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman, who is in Southampton, New York. Rikki, good morning to you. I want to start with the question, in this classified documents case, we are now at a total of 40 counts facing Donald Trump. If he is found guilty, what kind of punishment would he face?
Well, ultimately, he is facing tens of years in prison. I mean, you could look up to 80 years in prison, but facing the maximum has no reality, Margaret. What we're really looking at is how a judge would assess what is appropriate, and that goes back to what we call the judicial guidelines for crimes such as these. In addition to that, Donald Trump does not stand in the same shoes as any other defendant, because you do have considerations about whether or not you're going to put him in prison at all if he were to be convicted, and then the logistics of such a detention in terms of Secret Service. He's entitled to it throughout his life. So it is not simple to say he's going to face 80 years in prison or 8 years in prison. It's really what is the best thing to do at the time if there is a conviction and a sentence. Also keep in mind, Margaret, there's appeals. This could take a very, very long time.
And there will be political ramifications here, but we know this won't practically prevent him from continuing this bid for the presidency. Catherine, I want to get to what we just played, that audio tape that you obtained. The indictment, the superseding indictment, included reference to this document, which investigators had found. Previously, Donald Trump said didn't exist. Audio shows he was talking about it. What is the significance of it?
Well, charging the Iran document has a ripple effect. It undercuts the former president's public statements that he was just showing some media articles and clippings. But I think it also opens the door to the potential compromise of sources, methods, tactics, and military techniques. A war plan is a very unique document. It is a reflection of what the U.S. government believes to be the weaknesses of an adversary, in this case, Iran. It probably included intelligence from our allies in the region. So the sensitivity of this document is unique and also so important to U.S. national security. And
national security, I mean, protecting the American public is a fundamental responsibility of the American presidency. And there's another document referenced in there as well, a map included in that charge. Robert, the former president's attorneys were at the Department of Justice this past week. What were they talking about? What kind of agreement, if anything, did they come to?
Those lawyers are waiting to see if the former president will be indicted on the January 6th investigation being led by the special counsel. Right now, the special counsel...
The second federal case.
There are two federal cases on separate tracks being led by Jack Smith, one on classified records, which is ramping up with these additional indictments. And there's also the investigation of Trump's conduct in and around January 6th. But what we hear about the January 6th investigation is intriguing. It's not just about Trump's conduct on the day of the attack, and we heard a lot about that from the House committee that investigated it, but this is more about an alleged sweeping scheme led by Trump to overturn the 2020 election. And in conversations with sources last night close to Trump and this morning, there is some concern around the Republican frontrunner that this is not just a campaign now. It's almost like he's leading a legal defense fund. So many people around Trump are looking to his PAC, Save America, to pay their legal fees. In a filing we expect to come on Monday, there will be tens of millions of dollars, perhaps $40 million, that is being put toward legal expenses from a political action committee. And that's an indication of what's to come in the coming weeks as Trump faces not only those two special counsel investigations, but he faces also a possible indictment in Georgia for his pressuring of election officials. And you have the New York case hovering on the horizon over those hush money payments. All of it, though, comes down to how Trump puts pressure, allegedly, on people around him, including those who work at that Mar-a-Lago property.
And this indictment is incredibly detailed about some of those things, text messages, implication that the boss wanted.
They called him the
deletion.
boss. They called him the boss inside Mar-a-Lago. The boss wants us to do this. He's maybe suggesting we should delete footage. Trump has denied that he suggested that they should delete any footage, and Trump's lawyers have told us they do have some of that footage. Trump said today he has that footage. It was never deleted. But this comes down to a culture, and a culture that could come back to the United States in terms of governing if Trump wins the White House again. Who is this person who exerts this kind of pressure intensely on the people around him?
Rikki, I want to get to you on something Robert Costa just mentioned in terms of the legal fees. There's been reporting in the New York Times and the Washington Post that it gets up to $40 million in legal spending to defend Trump and people working with him. That this money that people out there donate to his campaign then gets used as part of a legal defense for people working for him and for Mr. Trump himself. Is that appropriate? Is there anything to prevent that?
There probably is nothing to prevent it, and it may not be inappropriate if people know that when they contribute to the PAC, that one of the things they may be contributing to is, in fact, Donald Trump's legal fees, but also the legal fees of others. By the way, Margaret, one of the things that happens in multiple defendant cases, if there is a leader of the PAC, and in this case it is Donald Trump, as Robert Costa pointed out, when we look at the speaking indictment, it's the boss wanted the server deleted, the boss. It often happens in multiple defendant cases that whoever is the boss and who has access to the money may pay the fees of other defendants, and that becomes a known factor. However, when you have someone like the now employee number 4, whose name has now been disclosed by the press, Mr. Tavares, that when he is going to now testify against Walt Nauda, against Donald Trump, his co-defendants, he cannot possibly be represented by a lawyer who is working in tandem with Donald Trump's lawyers. So he had to get a new lawyer, and I am quite sure that his legal fees will no longer be paid by Donald Trump.
Catherine, I want to come back to you on another big legal development this past week. The U.S. attorney in Delaware, as we know, for 5 years has been investigating Hunter Biden, the son of the president. This has been wide-ranging, but the deal came down to 2 tax charges and a diversion agreement related to a gun charge. What happened in that courtroom this week that made the judge hit the brakes?
Well, I was inside that courtroom, Margaret, just sitting about 20 feet behind Hunter Biden during that 3-hour hearing. The simple explanation is that the federal judge is always handling plea agreements. They're very familiar documents to her. And when this one hit her desk, she said, hold on a minute. This is not a standard agreement. These are different terms than what I'm used to. And when she pulled that thread, what she found out is that there was no agreement between the defense and the prosecution over whether this deal would shut down the prospect of any future criminal charges. And that is really when the whole thing went off the rails.
And now we know in 30 days' time,
Correct.
they will have to reconvene in regard to this agreement. So it could come together?
It could come together. What I would say, being inside that courtroom for 3 hours, is that the two sides now have an opportunity to answer her questions and sort of renegotiate the language in this plea. But as one former federal prosecutor said to CBS News, what happened in that courtroom was a train wreck. And based on the judge's line of questioning, I think that these could be big gaps to bridge. And the bar may be even higher with this federal judge to get her approval.
Catherine Herridge, Robert Costa, Rikki Klieman, thank you so much for laying out the big developments of the week.